without further ado, I'll start the introductions and we'll get this thing going. My name is Skip Short, and I'm one of the co-leaders of the Citizens Climate Lobby Snohomish chapter, along with Mark Rohde and Jim Bloss. Welcome to everybody to Keeping the Lights On, a chat with the EFSEC Leadership. That's with Kathleen Drew, the chairperson, and Sonia Bumpus, the director of the Washington State Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council. So, and again, this is sponsored by the Snohomish chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. Mark Rohde, as I say, is one of our co-leaders in the chapter. And he's a person responsible for the flyer. So that very informative and creative flyer is his work. And he's a very valuable contributor to our permit reform group, as is Jim Bloss, another co-leader. And it was because of Jim that we were able to get you in here, Kathleen and Sonia. And that's one of Jim's skills. He reaches out and communicates and brings all kinds of very impressive and important people such as yourselves into our chapter for reviewing. Jim, would you like to make the introductions?
I would. Thank you, Skip. And I wrote it out so that I tend to drift. So I wrote it out so I don't drift. But we are pleased to have as our presenters two of EFSEC's top leadership, maybe the top leadership, with us to chat with us about the organization's role in bringing new energy projects on board in Washington State. Kathleen Drew, EFSEC Chair, and Sonia Bumpus, EFSEC Director. And seeing who's on this call, I'm sure most of us are aware that CCL National's top priorities relate to advocating, one of them, for a less complex, simpler siting evaluation and permitting process for new energy projects, especially those that would directly and hopefully quickly reduce carbon production and address climate change goals. Chair Drew has presided over 6 major siting recommendations involving wind and solar energy production, with another 6 major projects currently under review and a major transmission project in a pre-application stage. She's also worked on a number of environmental issues with during Governor Chris Gregoire's administration, along with working in government and community relations at the U of W, Sound Transit, and the Port of Seattle. Director Bumpus took the helm of EFSEC in 2019 with earlier work in transmission line projects in energy facility siting and compliance management. Between the two, they have experience and educational background in communications, political science, and biological and health sciences. And I note in their bios that both are alumni of Evergreen State College. Let's crank out great leaders. At this point, I need to mention a correction to our publicity flyer in that neither speaker can take process questions about current projects under review due to ex parte restrictions. So we won't pressure on those. So our speakers are giving us some of their personal time, so we're going to honor that sacrifice by holding our planned program time of 1 hour, counting Q&A period. Mark and I will be monitoring the chat to see if we can pick up some of your questions and thoughts. So, without further ado, Chair Drew, Director Bumpus, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Jim, if you could, I'm sorry, Kathleen, I've got a couple other points to make real quick before you get started. I wanted to make sure that any unasked questions or follow-on questions, if it's okay if we send those to Andrea
Sure.
After this, because I'm sure there'll be more questions than you can possibly answer. Want to let everybody know I'll take a picture at the end. I'll be recording this and I'll be sharing that recording with everybody that was in attendance and we sent it to. Want to ask everybody to please wait on asking their questions until Kathleen or Sonia, if we ever get her back again, asks for those questions. This might be all on you, Director Drew. I mean, Chair Drew, Chairperson Drew. And then, as Jim said, the speakers cannot take process questions about current projects under review because of ex parte restrictions. So I just wanted to get that in. I apologize for interrupting, Kathleen. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. And yes, I know that Sonia had been dropped again, so she was doing a restart. So we hope she'll be able to join us. I mean, virtual meetings are great when they work for everybody. And now I'm echoing. So I've got to figure out what's going on there.
Let's see. Could everybody please mute? That isn't a speaker.
Oh, I've got an idea. Can you hear me? Okay. I had to turn my own other computer off, like I said. Skills. I'm still building them, even after however many decades of work. But here we are, Washington State Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council. You can see the screen. We'll go to the next slide. Whoops. So EFSEC is an old entity, not as old as the state, but about 50 years old, when it was formed in 1970 to provide centralized siting and permitting for energy facilities, primarily nuclear, and for siting and permitting of those large-scale thermal power plants, nuclear facilities. Later, it was added natural gas and oil pipelines, oil refineries, and underground natural gas storage fields. Those are all required to go through EFSEC. And I will say that today we have one operating nuclear facility, and that is Columbia Generating Station, which we are the certificate holder for the state of Washington. And that includes not the regulation of nuclear itself, but of the activities of the plant, emergency management, any impact on the surrounding environment that is covered by state law. So, and we have two natural gas facilities under our jurisdiction, one in Grays Harbor and one in Chehalis. Excuse me, Centralia. I mixed those two up, I'm sorry to say. The council itself consists of members from state agencies, and during the review of a project includes local government from that jurisdiction. EFSEC develops recommendations to the governor, and this says the governor's office. I should have corrected it. It's the governor who makes the final decision. I mean, he may have people in his office who also review it, or she. The final decision preempts other state and local government decisions. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But we have a site certification agreement, which is signed by the governor and the applicant, which serves as the contract for the development of the site. In 2022, there were a number of legislative changes with a House bill and gross second substitute House Bill 1812. For those of you who follow legislation, that means it was amended a lot of times as it passed through each chamber. And what was added at that time was new project types that can come before EFSEC, including, there's Sonia, clean energy product manufacturing, green electrolytic hydrogen, energy storage, and high voltage transmission. The transmission could always come to us, but it had to opt in. So we'll get to that actually in the following year's bill. We also, the legislature added increased tribal consultation with DAP, which stands for the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, for those of you who don't know, and an equity focus. It expanded our pre-application process and put it into statute and added more transparency and opportunities for public involvement and public comment. One of the things I'll say is it also created us into independent agency, whereas in recent years, we'd been under the UTC, not for any policy or direction, but administrative. Before that, we were under the Department of Commerce. And frankly, as we began to grow, when you're second fiddle, the resources that you pay for aren't always there to help you with the human resource needs, the budgetary needs, even whether or not you pay for them. I mean, it's just a reality of bureaucracies. So we asked, as this bill was coming forward from the governor's office, to create us into an independent agency, which is what we are now, because of the increase in the number of projects that have come before us. And we can talk a little bit more about that. We needed to act more quickly than we could as a secondary under another agency. In 2023, there were legislative changes associated with a transmission bill. I chaired a transmission work group in the interim before that, and the changes that were in that bill came from that work group. Identified that transmission was crucial to achieve our goals, expanded the transmission planning horizon for the regulated utilities to 20 years, which if you have been studying this permitting, it's really a very challenging environment to understand the publics versus the privates and all of that. I'm no expert on it. But the regulated utilities do have the most impact. Well, let me say this. Control over transmission. Some of them are transmission builders themselves. Not everybody builds transmission. And we have BPA, which is a whole nother story. And clarifies that our authority over high voltage transmission lines is that lines that are 500 kilovolts and above, usually that's the highest, must, and go through multiple counties, must come to EFSEC, whereas before it was optional. And we do have a project in pre-application, which we probably shouldn't talk too much about because it hasn't come to us yet, but along the Columbia River. And so it is up on our website. If you want to go look at it for your own information, you can do so. It hasn't come to the council yet. It's still in the pre-application process. And this bill also required EFSEC to prepare programmatic environmental impact statements on future transmission lines. And Sonia is going to get into that in more detail in her part of the presentation. The membership of this council is listed on the screen. The regular members are the members that you see on the left-hand side of the screen, which is myself. I'm appointed by the governor. The others are appointed by the heads of their agencies. And so the Department of Ecology, Fish and Wildlife, Commerce, Natural Resources, and Utilities and Transportation Commission. On the right-hand side are optional members during a project review. So for each one of the projects, we have different members on it. From this optional side, if you will. And there are agencies, Department of Agriculture, Transportation, Health, and the Military Department. For those of you who don't know, the Military Department is the lead on emergency services. And as I mentioned, some of our facilities very much need to have emergency services through the Military Department, contract with them for that activity. And then the local government application review. If the project is within a county jurisdiction, there's a county membership. If it's within a city jurisdiction, there's a city. The city and the county can appoint a member. And if it's in a port district, the port can appoint a non-voting member. So that all would constitute a council for the application review process. Anything else, any other business that's done is done by the 6 members of the council. So that's where we are there. And with the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Sonia Bumpus. Oh, I'm going to stop here. Actually, Sonia, we didn't talk about this, but I decided in talking to the gentleman that I would take questions and then pass it over to you.
Okay, sounds good. We'll see how my connectivity goes. It seems like it's a little better now that I rejoined.
Okay.
Excellent. So thank you for joining us again. So I guess I'll ask, are there any questions about what Chair Drew just presented?
Okay, let's go on to the interest. Go ahead.
I have in the you showed the directors for each of the departments but they can appoint any member of their department to attend the meetings in their stead. Is that not correct?
It's the director. No, the people there are the people who have been appointed by the directors.
Right. Oh, okay. So the directors rarely attend. It is generally the people that have been appointed, and I assume that they're generally very capable individuals.
Oh yes, absolutely. Mike Livingston, for example, is the Eastern Washington Director of Fish and Wildlife, for example. So yes, Eli Levitt is in the Ecology's Air and Water Division. You know, that's the level. I know that Elizabeth Osborne's from the Energy Division of Commerce. So everybody has a very good background. Those are the ones I remember off the top of my head. Yeah. Lenny Young's been there forever at DNR. I'm not quite sure what he does.
Okay. Mark Rohde has a question.
I'll comment that I'm a transplant from Arizona, and one of the things that I most respect about Washington is that everybody gets a say. It certainly looks like you've got a diversity of opinion, a diversity of input. I'm also aware, though, that the more people that have input, plus the community having input, puts you in a position of having an awful lot of people that would say no. Frankly, I'm surprised that you get as many projects through as you do right now, given that everybody seems to potentially have a veto. And can you comment on that?
Well, it's not a popularity contest. And it's based on, our process is based on science. And that's why it's important for Sonia to have a chance to go through that. So we base it on our state environmental policy law, which is very substantive. Not very many states have a state environmental impact, environmental policy act like we do. So we're not looking at what's popular, we're looking at what the impacts are. And then with that, and I didn't show up here our statutory language, which requires us to balance impacts with the need for clean energy. But I might go and pull that up on another screen while Sonia's going through her presentation, and I could show that to you later if you'd like. If I'm that talented, we'll see.
Is that good for you, Mark?
No, that sounds good. I appreciate the response. I still think it's really challenging to get a project approved, given the kind of input that you have to have. And it sure looks like the community sometimes has they don't necessarily have their mind on science, nor do they have their mind on the needs of the state when you're considering an energy project.
Well, that can be, but we have our minds on science and also on the input from our underrepresented communities, including the tribes. So like I said, we don't count responses.
Excellent. Sonia, I guess it's your turn to help us understand the EFSEC.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to start with my video on, and then we'll we'll see if the connection issues pop back up, and if they do, I'll turn it off. So, but I'll try to start at least.
Director Drew, you're going to, Chair Drew, you're going to have to stop sharing. And then Sonia, you're going to have to share. Unless
No,
you guys are both.
I've got the show. She's going to talk. I'll just take myself off audio.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Very good. Sorry for the interruption.
No, thanks for that. Yeah, Chair Drew's driving, so, and I'm used to that. So, the next slide is about the types of energy facilities that EFSEC has jurisdiction for. So there's multiple different types, as you can see, that are listed here on the slide. We have jurisdiction to cite nuclear power facilities. These are specifically nuclear facilities that are going to generate electricity and for sale on the grid. And we also have thermal power plants with a threshold of 350 megawatts. But and these are facilities that are required to come to EFSEC for permitting by the state. The other projects like clean energy manufacturing, alternative energy resources, which are like wind, solar, electrolytic hydrogen, those are facilities that can opt in, and there's not a specific size, a threshold that's indicated. They can just choose to come to us, or they can go through what I call sort of the traditional permitting process. This Chair Drew already talked about this a little bit earlier, but this also identifies transmission lines greater than 115 kilovolts, which are optional, and then the requirement for transmission lines that are 500 kV and on. And then there are also some other more prescriptive parameters for pipelines, refineries, and storage facilities. This slide doesn't get into like barrels per day and things like that, but there are in our statute. One thing before I go to the next slide, and this was just thinking about Mark's question to Chair Drew about, citing through EFSEC and the fact that there are, several members right on this panel. One of the things that I'd add to what Chair Drew said is that EFSEC's creation was to create sort of this one-stop shop. And so while there are maybe, I guess you could say there's a potential for things to get congested because there's multiple people that are, kind of involved in the decision making, and there could be disagreements and things like that. While that may be, there also are trade-offs of that, in that EFSEC does permitting, and the site certification agreement is essentially issued in lieu of any other requirements that the developer would need to get from other state agencies with their own specific jurisdictions. So I just wanted to note that. It's just a thought I had. So I'll go to the next slide now. This is a map of EFSEC's facilities, and this map is on our website. It shows the status of applications that are currently under review in yellow. The green indicate an operating facility. So these are facilities that are certificated by EFSEC with a site certification agreement, and they're operational. Then we also have the approved construction started, light blue. And then dark blue is, construction hasn't started. So they're certificated, but they haven't began their construction work. Red indicates a project that's rejected. And then if it's clear, it's a project that's no longer operational. And so as we get new applications to EFSEC, which we have, been getting more applications than we have historically, we'll come in and update this map. And as I said earlier, it's available on the website. And we also update it as we are working with the certificate holders to find out where they are in the project. I'll talk a little bit about this in the next slide for the site certification process, but you might be wondering, like, well, how does EFSEC know, right? Like when all these things are happening, like when they're getting ready for construction and when construction has started and when it's finished and when operation has commenced. And this next slide that I'm going to talk about, the site certification process, kind of starts from that. So this is the, oh, I just got a message that the internet connection is unstable. So I hope you can hear me. Okay, good. So in this slide, there's a diagram here that's showing you the different tracks of the EFSEC process. And it's basically trying to show it in a flow chart, but it's pretty complicated. So the green arrows that you're seeing here, they indicate where there's a milestone that we're flagging in the process that is key to moving forward to the next step. So you can see here that there's an application submitted. There's an initial public informational meeting that EFSEC holds. This is a statutory requirement. There's also a land use hearing that we hold, and we will take testimony about land use. So usually the local government is involved in that and will come and provide testimony if there are concerns about land use, or they may say that they're supportive of the project in terms of being compliant with local zoning ordinances and such. So you'll notice that there's another track that's SEPA in the middle. So when EFSEC gets this application for site certification, we'll have that public informational meeting, and that sort of starts this kickoff of doing the SEPA review. So that means reviewing the application in order to make a determination under SEPA. So that's that middle track. The land use consistency hearing that I talked about, and there's a consistency determination that follows that. That path continues, and eventually we'll get to an adjudicative hearing if the project required an EIS on the SEPA track. There's obviously lots of opportunity for public input. As you can see, there's some areas where it indicates like the DEIS issuance and public comment period that would follow under SEPA. The adjudication, it's actually, I don't think here in the slide, but in the adjudicative track, it also has an opportunity for others to provide input into, even though it's adjudicative and it's basically folks identifying themselves as parties and saying, hey, we're going to participate in the adjudication as interveners. We still have this other element where when we come into adjudication, we'll ask everyone, hey, you can either request the council include you as an intervener, so you can request intervention and participate in the adjudication as a party, or you can just provide a comment to EFSEC. You're not gonna come and participate as a party, but you want to have information that you're going to provide considered in the adjudicative record by the council. So it's not on this slide, but there is that piece. And then on the far right of the slide, there's the leg, the track that has to do with permits. And the next slide talks more about permits, but essentially it is something that we are reviewing. We're reviewing permit applications when we review the whole application in order to make the SEPA determination, in order to understand land use issues, if it looks like there are any. And we're also looking at anything in the application related to the kinds of environmental permits that they might have identified. Oh, it looks like there's a comment from Mark.
It's
You
not
can either
relevant to
take
your current
questions
discussion.
now or
No, much later.
continue later. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So I'll we can go ahead and go to the next slide, and I can talk a little bit more about the permit issuance. So the one thing that I did not talk about on the last slide was just that at the conclusion of the environmental review under SEPA, the land use consistency determination, an adjudicative hearing if one is warranted, and the all of the permits that may be required. If the council recommends approval, the SCA will identify any permits that are needed, and then the site certification agreement itself is prepared by the council, and a draft is sent to the governor for review. And the SCA, the site certification agreement, will identify any other conditions that the council identified in its review that are necessary to mitigate for impacts that may have come from SEPA. There could be something related to land use, something that was learned through the land use consistency hearing process. And so they could have various conditions. They have a broad authority in terms and discretion in terms of conditioning projects to ensure that impacts are mitigated and addressed in the recommendation that they send to the governor. So going forward, talking about permit issuance, EFSEC is a unique entity, not just in that it's a one-stop shop for environmental review and siting of energy facilities that fall in our jurisdiction. The other thing that makes EFSEC unique from other EFSECs in other states, because there are some states that have either an entity comparable to an EFSEC, or they have something that's exactly like us, right? That they actually call it an EFSEC. One of the things that's unique about Washington's EFSEC is that we, like ecology, have delegated authority to issue permits under the Federal Clean Air Act and the Federal Clean Water Act. And we have to do as an agency, we have to do all the things that ecology has to do in order to maintain that delegated authority from the EPA. So that includes in issuing water quality permits, such as an NPDES stormwater construction permit or operational permit. Same goes for air quality permits. In doing that, EFSEC has to work really hard to make sure that we keep our state implementation plans up to date, work the ecology regularly with their team that do the same thing to do that, to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements that EPA has in order to stay current and keep our delegation to issue those permits for our facilities. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out that's unique. EFSEC works with other agencies, but that coordination continues after the project is certificated and we go into the compliance phase. And so we are working with the Department of Ecology to make sure that the operator is compliant with their permit conditions, operating permits, construction permits. And if there are issues that are identified, we are often coordinating with our other agencies who have the expertise on those requirements to see how we can resolve the issue. And we're obviously working with the operator as well. Okay, let's go. I think the next slide, yes, recommendation to the governor. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but basically, the council makes the recommendation whether to approve or deny an application for site certification. They transmit that recommendation to the governor, and then the governor has 60 days once they receive the application or the recommendation, whether they want to go with that recommendation. They can approve if the council's approving or not, reject the application, reject the project basically, or they can remand it, which is to send it back to the council and ask the council to reconsider some aspect of the recommendation. Just as an example, in the past, years ago, there was a remand from the governor at the time, and it was basically asking them to go back and get more information and consider a very specific aspect of that project. So remands can be broad, they can be really specific. Sometimes it's a matter of getting more information, and sometimes it's maybe in the council used to recommendation.
You got a little bit broken up there.
That's rejected by the governor. That's fine.
You're breaking up, Sonia.
We can go to the next slide.
I think that
Sonia, could you
that-
repeat your last couple sentences?
Yeah, am I clear now?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think so. I think I was talking about if the application is rejected by the governor, that's.
Oh,
Now she's gone altogether.
all
She
together.
said, so there she is. She's coming back in. But she was saying that the remand could be narrow or it could be broad.
Right.
And we have had that in the past. And actually, Sonia and I are going to go back in and rewrite some of the language in the slides, because this here is that it's the governor must approve the recommendation. And if it's for a project, execute the draft certification agreement, or reject the recommendation, which
Mhm.
would reject the project entirely.
Right.
Okay. So it's a little difficult to understand, but people kind of use shorthand on the language and you lose a little bit of the intent. Or the governor can remand the recommendation to the council for reconsideration. And then after that, that any application rejected by the governor is final as to that. So you can't come back and try again through EFSEC.
Right.
So we'll move on to the next one. And this is compliance. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Am I coming in clear right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I talked a little bit about this earlier, but compliance and monitoring and enforcement. So this is another thing that's unique about Washington's EFSEC from other EFSECs in other states. So with the project, EFSEC stays with the project once it's certificated all the way through the life of the project. So this includes compliance monitoring and enforcement if there are compliance issues. So there's sets of conditions that I talked about a little bit earlier that may be part of a site certification agreement. There could be very tailored conditions. There are requirements that are, meeting the state's requirements with respect to wetlands and any, water quality concerns, air quality concerns, water rights, all these kinds of things that are included in a site certification agreement, as well as those permits we talked about earlier that, may be federally delegated permits. The other area where there's potential for tailored conditions for a project, how it constructs, how it operates, how it decommissions down the road, may come from the environmental review. And so that's what that bullet where it says EIS or MDNS stipulated mitigation, that's what that's talking about, where the council looks at what the SEPA review yields and the FEIS offers mitigation to address an impact. And so the council can accept those measures and incorporate them into the site certification agreement that they send to the governor. They can tailor those conditions to be more or less stringent based off, other information that's available to them in the record. Because remember, there's also this adjudicative process, right? So there's another channel for information to come to the council. One thing that I didn't talk about earlier that we probably should, going to your point, Chair Drew, update the slides a little bit, is tribal consultation. That's another channel where information can come in to the council, where the chair is conducting government to government consultation when a tribe requests it during the application review process. So that's another channel that could come in and may, end up meaning that there's some condition that's added to address concerns expressed by a tribe that's affected. And then enforcement authority. EFSEC does have enforcement authority. And so if there is something that occurs where the permittee is not in compliance with their site certification, the council has the enforcement authority there and can penalize the project if they are not compliant with the conditions in their site certification agreement. Okay, next slide. So decommissioning, another thing that's unique about EFSEC, again, we're staying with the project all the way through the life of the facility. So for decommissioning, what this means is that in the site certification agreement, one of the things that EFSEC statute specifically calls out is that the certificate holder has to develop an initial site restoration plan before they go to construction. So you can see here, it talks about an ISRP required at least 9 construction. That site restoration plan lines what the developer certificate holder, I keep calling them different things, right? But what they're going to do when the time comes to decommission the facility and restore the site. So again, there could be conditions that the council tailors or that are identified from the environmental review, what have you, adjudication that are outlined as part of the site restoration plan and plan to decommission the facility many years after operation has ceased. So that happens before construction can begin, and that is a plan. There are a lot of pre-construction plans that are involved that aren't talked about in these slides, and they do vary by project because different types of projects have different types of plans that they need to create depending on what they're building. But this is something that's required across the board, and it's a plan that is reviewed by the council, and they determine whether or not to approve it. And if they do not approve it, then it has to be worked on, and concerns have to be addressed before construction can move forward, because this plan has to be approved by the council. Now, once the facility is operated and it's at the end of its life and it's going to be decommissioned, there is a detailed site restoration plan that's submitted that's also reviewed by the council, and the council has to be comfortable and okay with everything that the permittee is going to do in terms of decommissioning the site, restoring the site. The last bullet there, financial assurance is required. So EFSEC, as part of the site certification agreement, includes a condition for financial assurance, and this is done in the namely in the event that a permittee, their financial situation could change, they could shut down due to some type of financial hardship or something like that. And so there has to be some type of fiduciary instrument that is provided so that the money is there down the road when the site needs to be decommissioned and restoration needs to take place. We don't want to have a situation where an operator has to shut down perhaps or something like that, and because of bankruptcy or something like that is unable to pay for the decommissioning and the site restoration requirements stipulated by the council. So we have that in there that the permittee has to provide. And then I think this is our last slide. This is just information. It's information we provide to the public about how to contact us, but it's also good here. These are ways to contact the EFSEC agency. If you have comments, you can send them to the email address there. We have a comments@efsec.wa.gov. We do pretty much, we have comment periods, but we have lots of comments in between. We just created an inbox so that those can go there. And we do check that regularly, and those comments are part of the record. And
Questions?
then you'll see that there is a, yeah, I think that's everything. I think I was breaking up at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Director Bumpus. That was excellent. It really was. We've got a lot of questions. We've got some sort of programmed questions that were part of the initial flyer. And then we've got some really good questions. I don't know if I have the ability to properly sort through these, but there is one question that I think there's a lot of likes for in the chat, and that's a challenging question. And I'll just read this. This is from Lee Alley. Some press coverage of national perspective on the time it takes for a new energy facility online to get it online and delivering energy. The customer is roughly 10 years, more or less. Is it possible for you to characterize some of the patterns or even just the anecdotes about how comparatively long it takes in Washington?
I can't really compare to other states at all. First of all, the important thing to know about EFSEC is it's optional. So
right.
Facilities have other options to take. Now, granted, in our state, some of the counties have put moratoriums in, which we didn't talk about this in detail, but EFSEC has statutory ability to preempt land use. We need to, if we do so, we need to have an adjudication. We have to say why. We have to review all the land use laws. So there's a process to it. So everything with the process, as somebody said, takes time. And yet, if we're going to be giving such a substantial power of preempting a local government's land use authority for a reason, then I think we have to have a very thorough we have to have a substantial process to do so. It warrants it. Does that mean time? I don't know. That's yet to be seen. One thing that was allowed for in the 1812 bill, actually, is specifically that if an applicant to EFSEC receives an MDNS, mitigated determination of non-significance, but the land use is inconsistent, we can do an adjudication just on the land use. In other words, our adjudication doesn't have to open it up to all the issues. And we haven't done that yet. We may possibly be doing that sometime later this year, looking at that approach. So that's one way to address specific issues through adjudication and not all the issues through adjudication. If also we have an expedited process, which the last 3 projects before the one that we're still not done with, but all took less than a year from application to us to sign off by the governor. They were solar projects. And that's because they received the mitigated determination of non-significance, and they were consistent with land use. So we have a way to do it, but once you get into significant environmental impacts, yes, it takes longer, and there's a reason for that. You have to do an EIS, but again, I think there are reasons for that. I'll speak, I don't know, Sonia, if you want to talk about this, but we also have in that 1812 legislation, that's the name of the bill number, not the statute number, by the way. Our statute is RCW 80.50, and it's all in there now. Is that, and we believe you could do it under SEPA anyway, but it spells it out in our statute that the SEPA official, which is the executive director, Sonia, if the SEPA official is going to determine a finding of significance, that person must let the applicant know and give the applicant a chance to change their project. That still takes time, but it doesn't take time in the public process. And so you might say, this project application came in on this day, what's all this stuff going on? It could be any one of a number of things. It could be a developer, an applicant saying, we would rather minimize our impact. And so we're going to step back and work with you on how to do that before we get to the next phase of our project. What is time? You know, some of those things have value. And I understand the critical nature of what we're facing around the world. Some of these are just, it's really about looking at the impacts and working through some very difficult community and regional and state issues. It's not easy stuff.
Very good. Very good. We've only got 4 minutes.
Well, you know, we can stay a few minutes longer if you want to.
Okay, that would be great. If people want to stay on, we'll cut it off, put a limit to say 10 minutes over.
Okay.
If, Director Drew and I mean Director Bumpus and Chair Drew, I appreciate that.
I promise. I promise 7 o'clock. Go ahead.
Well, we're going to press on for a little bit here since
Okay.
Chair Drew said that they can afford that time.
Okay.
If we've got some programmatic questions, you know, that were part of the flyer. Let's go ahead and go down those if we can. We've got a lot. We've got way more questions than you can possibly answer. And again, I will send those questions off if it's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure all of the questions on the flyer pertain to us, so let's go through them.
Okay, real good. So you've talked about how the permitting energy projects work in Washington. So that was the first question, but I think you kind of addressed that. And I don't want you to spend a half an hour talking about what factors most impact the decision to approve an energy project. That's a fairly complex question, is it not?
It is, but you saw our process is it's heavily weighted on 2 things: land use and environmental review.
Okay. so the environmental impact statement, and land use. Okay. How about this one? This is one that I think everybody's interested in, and there's a question online on the chat that's similar to this, and that is that the Washington's Department of Ecology has stated that we need 6 times more clean energy than we have today to meet our commitments by 2050. How might EFSEC speed up the permitting process to help accomplish that? I know that's an emphasis that the governor is pressing on pretty hard.
Well, I think you have to look at what is that slows things down. One for us is getting an incomplete application where the impacts weren't really addressed. And we institute all that Sonia talked about, instituting a pre-application process. The work still needs to be done, but it needs to be done before they submit their final application to us.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well,
Director
I was just
Bumpus,
going
go ahead.
to, add on to what Chair Drew said, that it does come down to, where are the sticking points in terms of slowing things down. And one of the things EFSEC has learned, all of our staff have encountered this, is that when you have an incomplete application or you don't have all the information you need to evaluate a proposal, that really can delay things, because then you have to stop and go get that information. And so just to use an example, there could be, you could have a developer who's building in an area where there are wetlands and ecology, our wetlands person at ecology, and all the information we're looking at indicates that there's wetlands at the site, but the developer hasn't done the surveys. And so at the time that they come to us and they want us to process their application, they haven't done the surveys, but now they're having to wait until, spring to go do the surveys. And there's all kinds of field work that is driven by season. And we have narrow windows here for some of that work here in Washington with our weather. So you have things like that, pretty simple stuff where, you need to go out there and do this type of survey, but you're going to have to wait until the season to go out and do the work. And so there you are, you're waiting, that adds months potentially. And it's for one piece of information, but it's a critical piece of information. So that's just an example. And I would say the second thing, second comment about that is that we are really trying to engage developers as early as we can, so that they are aware of what they need to get in the application so that it is complete. Surprises along the way, they congest our process, and they also are not good for the developer because they don't get surprised, deep into the permitting process either. So we're trying to engage with them early so that we can flag things as early as possible, so that they're not, all the way into the application review process and find out there's some critical piece of information that they don't have. And that's going to actually be, maybe costly and timely to, or time intensive to get. So we're trying to do early engagement as well with our pre-application process.
Excellent. Mark Rohde has a bit of a follow-on that, and he says if incomplete applications slows the process, should tech support be provided prior to the application? And I have a little associated question with that. Is the new Department of Ecology's Clean Energy Siting Council providing any of that technical support that helps in that regard? So it's sort of a two-part on that, on incomplete applications.
Well, so I know that in terms of what a developer needs, ecology covers a lot of different permitting requirements, right? They do air permitting, they do water permitting, they do, so we're talking about industrial wastewater streams, stormwater construction permits. They also handle water rights. So if you're using more than 5,000 gallons per day for industrial use or something like that, you need a water rights permit. That's ecology. So ecology is able to advise them on things that fall within their bailiwick, which is pretty extensive. They're also, though, in that role, finding out as a sort of as a facilitator what the needs are of, say, the local government and things like that. So I think to that end, they are providing some measure of like technical support. They have a lot of really skilled people at ecology with lots of, environmental background. I do think, though, that a developer definitely should, get the support of a consultant. And one thing that I've noticed is that if you have an environmental consultant working with a developer that's never developed in Washington State, and the consultant also is not familiar with Washington State siting requirements and permitting requirements, that can be tricky. I think that's a big difference, even with the Clean Energy, Coordinating Council. I think that's still going to be something that's going to be important for developers through even in going through that process.
Well, and we did get our pre-application process into our statute. And the reason for doing that is so we could get funding from the legislature for it, so that we can get funding for our staff. And even in the pre-application process, we can enter into a cost-sharing agreement with the applicant. So we have worked so that we can fund our own staff also to be the ones who are working to identify what that is and making sure they're getting to fish and wildlife. We have had historic lack of staff support in a lot of the resource agencies, and that's been helped primarily from the Climate Commitment Act funding.
Excellent.
I've got a question related to that, Skip. This is Grant Bailey.
Grant!
Yes.
Hi. Hi, Sonia.
Hey, long time.
Yeah, it has been a while. It's been a long, long time. Related, you were talking about the latest legislation, which included and brought in some pre-consultation. The potential site study is still in the WAC. Are you recommending to some applicants with more maybe controversial projects that they do that? And it sort of gives them a blueprint for what to put in the application.
We actually updated that part of the statute too in that bill. I didn't quite get into that detail, and we always talk about it, but and put it forward. We haven't been taken up on it yet.
By an applicant?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real, I mean, it provides the kind of thing that the pre-consultation does, but with very specific detailed site data.
Well, I will tell you about Goose Prairie, which is completed and under construction and will be generating power as of September. Yay, in Yakima near Moxie. That company, One Energy, was the developer. They heard from Fish and Wildlife. They were planning on another site, and Fish and Wildlife said that's problematic for this, and this. Why don't you look at this area? And they moved their area. They came to us, they got an expedited permit, and they were done within a year. So to your point.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
And
So,
interestingly, there are different applicants. Some like getting advice from us and working with us, and some are more reluctant to do so.
I wasn't clear in Director Bumpus's response regarding the Clean Energy Siting Council. Are you the newly created one? Are you saying that they are helping, or with this incomplete application issue, or not?
Well, so the Clean Energy Siting Council is a group of agencies. I am on the council, EFSEC, participating in the council along with Commerce and Ecology, and there's others. But essentially, we're putting together an assessment of that's more related to permitting, permitting clean energy, making recommendations about how permitting can be maybe streamlined or improved. And it's a very comprehensive effort that the council's working on. In that same legislation, ecology has the specific role of coordinating, acting as the coordinator under that new path, right? That's available to to developers. So you know, the council at large isn't involved in that, but you know, if they haven't had a project go through the process yet. You know, how exactly it's going to look once we're actually doing it and, you know, we're ferrying somebody through, I think it's going to depend on the kind of project that it is, if there's more interplay from the other agencies. But the agencies that are on the coordinating council are, you know, sort of tapped into that and may be involved, right, in that coordination, that ecology would be the hub.
But separate from our process, because our process has been long developed as a hub and a one-stop shop. So we already have contracts with all those agencies. So if we need assistance in working with an applicant, we have staff to go to in those agencies to help us.
Excellent, excellent. So to be determined how helpful they are. My fingers are crossed that they'll help with that issue of pre-application. And you know, most of the agencies, like you say, are on both councils. So Mark has his hand up. He's been very patient. Mark?
As you might imagine, our working group has been trying to figure out what slows the application process down. A couple of things come to mind, and frankly, it's more on the developers than it is on the agency. It seems to me there's a gross lack of community development in some of the projects. The projects that go through in other states generally have community benefits attached to them. They're looking at employing the community. Sometimes they offer lower utility rates. There's a whole variety of these community benefits, but when that has happened in New York State, the applications are typically getting through in under a year. The other obvious concern is some of the applications are just plain crummy. If you were requiring consultation prior to application, that's likely to ease that process. If you were requiring the identification of community benefits, that's worked rather well in other states. I wonder if there's some consideration of that.
Well, yeah, we all the applications have tax, you know, whatever the although the taxes may be changing in terms of that, they all include that information, the socioeconomic impact, the number of jobs. In fact, many labor unions the trades have been coming forward and, you know, supporting projects going forward. So that you know, it's interesting about the utility bills, because our system is so different than a lot of regions in the country, because we're not a coordinated I don't know how many different utilities do we have. Like, I can't count them. So it's unfortunately, I mean, I was born in Pittsburgh. I grew up in the East and the Midwest. It's every type of agency for itself in a really separate but equal way out here. And we don't have some of the mechanisms, I don't think, to try and do some of that community benefit, especially on utility bills. Now, and the utilities themselves, if you're looking at Puget Sound Energy or Pacific Core are the two that come to mind, or Vista, they don't tend to, sometimes they will buy the power and therefore purchase the facility after it's been built, but they don't work on the front end of it. And a lot of times you see a company that will go through the siting process and sell it. And by the way, another thing we do that we didn't talk about is any ownership change, no matter where it is down the line, has to come to us for approval. So we keep an eye on that, but only a certain portion, a very small percentage of the projects are going through EFSEC. Most of them go through local government. So we have a whole suite of protections, from requiring the financial assurance to, requiring that any change in ownership comes to us, that help protect the public's interest, that are not widespread.
What percentage you say of projects go through local jurisdiction versus EFSEC?
Well, you saw our map. We have 6 operating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another 6 in front of us. Well, 6 operating or under construction. There's some that are waiting for construction, waiting for a power company to purchase power to come off of them, right? So Desert Claim, that's one that just had an amendment to extend their time a little bit because they haven't been able to sell their power. They don't have an off-taker. So that's why that one's not been built.
Okay.
So there's a whole market element on the other side of it getting purchased, which we don't even touch at all.
No, we're not talking about market.
No, but
okay.
it impacts when they're constructed. It impacts, they might come to us for construction, but then they have to wait in a queue to get transmission. They have to wait in a queue for all those other things. So those are all pieces.
They're all the pieces. Yes. Well, thank you very much, Chair Drew and Director Bumpus. I think we've gone well past the hour, 7:15. I want to thank everybody. I want to take a picture, if I can, of everybody. Okay. If you could, everybody show me your pearly whites. Here we go on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you again, Chair Drew and Director Bumpus. This has been wonderful. I'll be sending out the video link for this. If you could give me your updated presentation, you were going to change a couple things, and then I noticed that 8B 1812 was in there. I'll send that out with the link to the show.
I'll send you the one I have. I probably won't get around to changing the words on it yet. We're a little busy. But okay. I invite you all to attend our monthly meetings, which take place on the 3rd Wednesday of the month at 1:30 p.m. And you can keep up all the facilities, whether they're under construction, whether they're operating, they all report in. So it's kind of interesting, at least to me. And plus it keeps track of all the projects going through. So if you're interested, feel free to drop by. Certainly you're welcome to be on our communication list and whatnot if you're interested in anything.
Excellent. Thank you for that invitation,
Sure.
Drew. And I'll say good night to everyone, and thank you again for attending.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks for having us. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.